I watched Marcus freeze mid-stride across the cafe floor, his expensive Italian loafers clicking to a halt on the espresso-stained tiles. The entire room had gone silent, the kind of silence that makes your ears ring. Behind him, every single person in that place was clapping. Not polite golf clap applause. This was sustained, thundering, the kind of ovation you hear at award ceremonies or when someone wins the lottery on live television. "Get out of my establishment!" Marcus had just screamed at Danny, our dishwasher, his face purple with rage. "Go to the hall, shame! You're a disgrace!" But instead of shame, there was justice, and it was coming from the most unexpected source. Let me back up, because 3 weeks ago, none of this would have been possible. My name is Jennifer, and I owned a small upscale cafe called The Grind in downtown Portland. It's the kind of place where the espresso machine cost more than most people's cars, where the pastries came from a Michelin-starred baker in Seattle, where regulars paid $9 for a pour-over coffee without blinking. We had a waiting list for the weekend brunch reservation. The New York Times called us Portland's best-kept secret. I was 38, successful, respected. My credit score was in the 700s. I had a mortgage on a cute craftsman house in Northeast Portland, a 401k that was actually healthy, and a business that everyone envied. Everything looked perfect from the outside. My ex-husband, Marcus Chen, had walked back into my life 8 months ago with his hands in his pockets and a story about needing to reconnect with his roots after his tech startup failed. We'd been divorced for 4 years, a clean split, no kids, no drama. He'd moved to San Francisco during our marriage, built some app nobody remembers, and then suddenly he was back in Portland, asking if he could help with the cafe, just temporarily, to get back on his feet. I should have said no immediately, but Marcus had always been charming, and there was something sad about seeing him like that, deflated, humbled. So I gave him a job as a general manager. The salary was modest, but it came with health insurance and free lunch. Big mistake. Within 2 months, Marcus had convinced me to let him restructure operations and modernize the brand. He hired his friend Derek as the assistant manager, brought in his girlfriend Vanessa to do social media, and suddenly The Grind didn't feel like my cafe anymore. It felt like his project. He changed the menu without consulting me, raised prices, and started treating the longtime staff like they were incompetent. But the real problem was how he treated Danny. Danny had worked at The Grind for 5 years. He was 26, quiet, worked the 6 to 3 shift washing dishes, prepping vegetables, and keeping the kitchen running like clockwork. He'd been through a rough patch, homelessness, addiction, recovery, but he'd pulled himself together. He came in early, stayed late when needed, and never complained. The customers didn't know his name, but they saw the results. Spotless plates, fresh ingredients prepped with precision, a kitchen that hummed like a well-oiled machine. Marcus hated him on sight. "He's dragging down the vibe," Marcus told me one Tuesday afternoon, leaning against the espresso bar with his arms crossed. "He's too quiet. The customers can sense it. It's depressing." "Marcus, Danny works in the back. The customers never even see him." "Exactly. He's behind the scenes, and he's still managing to ruin the atmosphere of this place. I'm telling you, Jen, we need to let him go. Bring in someone younger, more energetic, someone who fits the brand." I refused. Danny was a good worker, and I didn't fire people based on their personality or appearance. But Marcus kept pushing. He started giving Danny the worst shifts, cutting his hours, assigning him extra tasks that weren't part of his job description. Last week, Marcus had him scrubbing the outside of the building in the pouring rain for 3 hours because he said the brickwork looked neglected. I should have intervened sooner. I didn't, and that's something I'll regret forever. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was in my office, a tiny room barely bigger than a closet, reconciling accounts when Marcus burst through the door. His face was red, his jaw clenched. "We have a problem," he said. "What now?" "The till is short, $4,300, over 3 weeks. My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "I've been tracking it. Money goes missing, usually on Danny's shifts. I've been watching him, Jen. He's stealing from us. I felt cold. Did you verify the till counts? Did you check the cameras? I don't need to check anything. It's obvious. Who else would it be? The guy's got a history. You know he was homeless, right? You know what that means. Once a thief, always a thief. Marcus, that's not how we handle this. If there's a discrepancy, we follow proper procedures. We review the security footage. We talk to Danny. We don't accuse anyone of anything until we have actual proof. I have proof, he said, and he pulled out his phone. Look at this. He showed me a video. It was grainy, shot from the security camera in the kitchen. It showed someone near the register during the lunch rush, someone in a dark hoodie reaching into the till. The footage was terrible. You couldn't see faces, couldn't see hands clearly, couldn't see anything definitively. That could be anyone, I said. It's Danny. You don't know that. I know it. His voice was cold now, certain in a way that frightened me. And I'm firing him. Today. Now. Before he steals more. I stood up. No, we're going to do this right. I'm going to review the footage with Derek and the accountant. We're going to check the till procedures. And if there's actual evidence of theft, not assumptions, evidence, then we'll go to the police and make a report. But we're not firing anyone based on a grainy video and your gut feeling. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. You always were too soft for this business, he said. Good thing I'm here to make the hard decisions. And that's when I realized I'd made a terrible mistake bringing him back into my life. I walked out of my office that Tuesday afternoon, feeling like the floor was tilting beneath my feet. Marcus's certainty had rattled me more than I wanted to admit. That night, I pulled the security footage myself, sitting alone in my home office with a glass of wine I didn't finish. The video was exactly as bad as I remembered, grainy, inconclusive, impossible to identify anyone definitively. But I also noticed something Marcus hadn't mentioned, the timestamp. The money went missing at 2:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. Danny's shift had ended at 3 o'clock. The person in the hoodie had accessed the register at 2:47. That meant nothing. And everything. I called Derek the next morning. He came into my office looking nervous, which immediately told me something was wrong. I need to ask you about the till discrepancies, I said, keeping my voice level. Marcus says it's been Danny. I want your honest assessment. Derek shifted in his seat. He was a thin guy in his early 30s, always dressed in black, always smelling like cigarettes. Marcus had hired him, which was already a red flag in my mind. Look, Derek said slowly, I've noticed things go missing on certain shifts. It's not just the till, sometimes food, sometimes supplies. Have you personally seen Danny taking anything? Not exactly seen it, but that's a no, I said. Derek, I need to know, do you have actual evidence, or is this speculation? He looked away. Marcus is pretty convinced it's him. That's not an answer. Okay, fine, no. I haven't seen him do anything. But that doesn't mean… Thank you, I said. That's all I needed. I spent that afternoon doing something I should have done immediately. I reviewed the entire security system. The cafe had 4 cameras, one in the dining area, one in the kitchen, one at the entrance, and one at the register. I pulled footage for the past 3 weeks and started watching, fast-forwarding through the mundane hours, looking for anything that stood out. It took me 6 hours, but I found it. On the Wednesday when the till was supposedly short $4,300, I watched Derek and Vanessa, Marcus's girlfriend, standing at the register during the lunch rush. I watched Derek distract the cashier, a 19-year-old named Keisha, with questions about a new pastry. I watched Vanessa's hand move quickly across the register, opening the drawer, removing bills, stuffing them into her apron pocket. I watched this happen not once, but 3 separate times that day. Then I checked other footage from other shifts. Same pattern, different days, always Derek creating a distraction, always Vanessa taking the money. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely operate the mouse. I saved the footage to a flash drive. Then I called my accountant, Linda, and asked her to meet me at the cafe before we opened the next morning. Linda arrived at 6:30 a.m. with a coffee from the place next door and a look of concern on her face. She was 62, had been handling my books for 8 years, and had the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that made her perfect for this situation. "I found something," I said, and I showed her the footage. We watched it together in silence. When it ended, Linda sat back in her chair and let out a low whistle. "That's theft," she said, "clear as day, and the amount, if they've been doing this for 3 weeks across multiple shifts, we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $8,000 to $10,000. They blamed it on Danny. Of course they did. Linda pulled out her phone. "We need to call the police. This is a crime, Jennifer. These people stole from you and tried to frame someone else to cover it up." I nodded, but something in me hesitated. "Let me talk to Marcus first." Linda gave me a look that said I was being naive. She wasn't wrong. I called Marcus and asked him to come in an hour early. He arrived looking irritated, probably assuming I was going to apologize for not firing Danny immediately. Instead, I locked the office door and showed him the footage. His face went white, then red. Then he started talking fast, making excuses, claiming he didn't know what Vanessa was doing, that Derek was acting alone, that he'd been trying to protect the business from Danny the whole time. His words were tumbling over each other, and I realized I was watching a man's entire, carefully constructed narrative collapse in real time. "You were going to fire an innocent person," I said quietly. "You were going to destroy someone's life to cover for your girlfriend and your friend." "Jen, Just don't. You're fired, Marcus, effective immediately. I'm keeping the footage. I'm reporting this to the police. And if you try to contact any of my staff or cause any problems, I'll press charges for theft and file a restraining order." He stood up, his face twisted with anger and desperation. "You'll regret this. Get out." I called the Portland Police Department that afternoon. The officer who came to the cafe was a woman named Officer Chen, mid-40s, with the kind of calm competence that made me feel like I'd done the right thing. She reviewed the footage, took my statement, and said they'd be opening an investigation. Vanessa and Derek would likely be arrested within 48 hours. But before any of that happened, I had to tell Danny the truth. He came in for his shift the next morning, and I asked him to meet me in the office. He looked terrified, probably assuming he was about to be fired. Instead, I told him everything: the accusation, my investigation, the footage, and what I'd discovered. Danny's eyes got watery. He didn't say much, just nodded and thanked me quietly. But as he was leaving the office, he stopped at the door and said, "Thank you for believing in me when it would have been easier not to." That hit harder than I expected. The police arrested Derek and Vanessa on Thursday morning. Both of them were charged with theft and fraud. Marcus wasn't arrested. He hadn't directly stolen the money, but he was named as a person of interest for his role in covering it up and falsely accusing Danny. His lawyer would probably get him off, but the damage to his reputation was done. On Friday, I did something I hadn't planned to do. I invited my entire staff to come in early before we opened. Every single person who worked at the grind. I stood in the dining area, in front of the espresso bar, and I told them the truth. I explained what had happened, how someone had tried to frame Danny, and how Danny's integrity had ultimately been proven. I apologized to Danny in front of everyone for not protecting him sooner. And then, something magical happened. The staff started clapping. Not polite golf claps. This was genuine, warm, sustained applause. Danny stood there looking embarrassed and moved, tears running down his face. The other employees were cheering, and I felt something shift inside my chest. A weight lifting, the world returning to its proper axis. Then, the cafe's front door opened. It was a Saturday morning, before we were officially open, but there stood the regulars. The people who'd been coming to the grind for years. Mrs. Patterson with her crossword puzzle, the tech guys who ordered pour-overs every morning, the yoga instructors who met here between classes. All of them had apparently gotten word about what had happened, and they'd come to support Danny. Mrs. Patterson walked up to Danny and hugged him. "We're proud of you, sweetheart," she said. The applause grew louder. More people filed in. By 9 o'clock, when we officially opened, The cafe was packed with people who just wanted to be there, to show solidarity, to make sure Danny knew he was valued. I watched Marcus's expression from across the room as he realized what was happening. He'd come in for his belongings, and I'd told him he could take them while the cafe was open. He'd walked in expecting a normal Friday morning. Instead, he'd walked into a moment of genuine human connection and justice, and he wasn't part of it. He was the outsider, the villain in a story where everyone else had chosen goodness. He grabbed his stuff and left without saying a word. 3 months later, Derek took a plea deal and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Vanessa got 14 months. Marcus moved back to San Francisco without saying goodbye. The grind recovered the money through restitution, and I used part of it to give Danny a raise and promote him to kitchen supervisor. Business actually improved. Turns out that people want to support places where integrity matters, where workers are protected, where doing the right thing is the default. We made the local news, not for scandal, but for a story about redemption and justice. The other night, a journalist called, asking if I wanted to tell my story on a podcast. I said yes, because Danny should hear it from someone other than me. He should know that standing up for what's right, even when it costs you, even when you make mistakes along the way, matters. It changes things. It changes people. Sometimes the smallest acts of integrity create the biggest waves.